Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to explore the story of Ted Bundy, his crimes, and what made him tick. Our source material today is a little strange. It's a YouTube transcript simply titled Pasted Text.
Wow.
But hey, sometimes
That's so
the
nice.
most fascinating insights come from the most unexpected places, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Now, before we dive in, I do want to acknowledge this is, a difficult topic, but I think we can learn from these dark chapters of history.
Oh, absolutely. Bundy's case is such a stark reminder that evil can hide in plain sight. And while it's disturbing, I think, understanding someone like Bundy can help us recognize warning signs. And maybe even prevent future tragedies. Fingers crossed.
So let's start with the basics.
Yeah.
Who was Ted Bundy? On the surface, his life seemed pretty normal.
Right.
Born in Vermont, raised in Philadelphia and Washington State, did well in school, was even involved in politics, and he even went on to study psychology at the University of Washington.
It's that seeming normalcy that makes his crimes all the more unsettling. It's almost like he was leading this double life. And I think that's one of the reasons his case continues to fascinate people today.
Yeah, it really is fascinating to think about how his psychology studies might have given him a chilling understanding of human vulnerability.
Totally, think about it. He was learning about the human psyche, delving into the complexities of behavior and motivation. It's not a stretch to imagine that knowledge being used to manipulate his victims, to exploit their anxieties, to gain their trust.
Oh, that's terrifying. It's like weaponizing his education. So let's talk about the crimes. Bundy's reign of terror lasted from 1974 to 1978.
And during that time, he targeted, abducted, raped, and murdered dozens of young women. The official count is really hard to pin down, but some estimates put the number of his victims closer to 100.
Wow. Our source material lists some of their names. Joni Lenz, who thankfully survived. Linda M. Healy. Janice Ott. Denise Naslund. Deborah Kent. And it tragically goes on.
Each name represents a life stolen, a family shattered by loss.
Absolutely. And the way he carried out these crimes was so calculated. He would often target women with long, dark hair. And he would pretend to be injured,
Oh, wow.
sometimes even wearing a fake cast.
Playing the role of someone helpless, someone in need of assistance. It allowed him to prey on people's empathy. It's just a cruel manipulation of human decency.
He used kindness as a weapon. Once he had them alone, he would overpower them, often using handcuffs or ropes. And the details of what happened next are too gruesome to go into here. But I think it's important to highlight that Bundy's crimes weren't just about violence. It was about power and control.
Absolutely. And perhaps the most disturbing aspect of all of this was his necrophilia. The fact that he returned to the bodies of his victims after death, it points to a level of depravity and obsession that's truly horrifying.
So how did he get caught? His first arrest was in 1975, right?
Yes, initially he was arrested on suspicion of kidnapping. But this is where things take a turn. Bundy escaped custody not once, but twice.
Wait, seriously,
Yeah.
how?
His first escape was meticulous planning. Exploited a weakness in the courthouse library security and simply walked out, blended right into the crowd. The second escape was even more audacious. He sawed a hole in the ceiling of his jail cell and dropped out.
Wow.
It speaks volumes about his cunning, his resourcefulness, and the desperation of a man who knew what awaited him if he was caught.
He sounds like something out of a movie.
He really does. His escapes only added to his notoriety and the public's morbid fascination with his case.
So when was his final capture?
His final arrest came in Florida in 1978, and this time there was no escape. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Bundy confessed to multiple murders, which ultimately led to 3 death sentences.
So he finally faced justice.
He did, but even in his final moments, Bundy remained a master manipulator. He gave interviews, confessed to some crimes, but hinted at others, leaving a trail of unanswered questions. And further fueling the public's fascination with him, it's as if he wanted to remain an enigma, even in death.
Almost like he wanted to control the narrative even from beyond the grave. It's baffling how someone who seems so normal could commit such horrific acts. I mean, was he just born evil? Or did something happen in his life that could even begin to explain it?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's puzzled psychologists and criminologists for decades, and there's rarely a single easy answer when it comes to something as complex as what makes a serial killer. It's usually a mix of nature and nurture.
So you're saying it was probably a combination of factors.
Exactly. There could be genetic predispositions, maybe a brain abnormality that impacted his empathy, but then you have to consider the environmental factors like childhood trauma, abuse, social isolation. All of these things can leave lasting scars and shape a person's worldview.
Yeah, like a perfect storm.
Yeah.
Creates this really dangerous individual. It's terrifying to think that someone so charming and charismatic could be capable of such brutality. Our source material even mentions that he used his charisma as a tool. He was intelligent, charming, and manipulative. All of these qualities probably helped him gain his victims' trust.
Oh, absolutely. His charm was like a mask, concealing the darkness beneath. It's a reminder that we can't judge a book by its cover.
You know, this makes me think about the media's role in his case. His trial was one of the first to be heavily televised, and it captivated the nation. Do you think that all that attention, even though it focused on his crimes, inadvertently turned him into some kind of celebrity?
It's an interesting point. While the media was trying to inform the public, it's possible that it may have fed his ego and contributed to his notoriety. Some experts even argue that it inspired copycat crimes.
Wow.
It's a really complex issue.
It makes you wonder about the ethics of covering these cases. Where's the line between informing the public and glorifying a criminal?
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a delicate balance. It's important to keep the public informed, especially if there's a risk to public safety. But at the same time, we have to be mindful of how we portray these criminals. We don't want to make them into anti-heroes.
Right. So, decades after his death, Bundy's legacy remains, well, complicated.
To say the least. He's still the subject of a lot of fascination. There's a whole industry built around true crime, and Bundy is one of the most prominent cases.
Our source even mentions a few examples of this continued fascination. Anne Rule's book, The Stranger Beside Me, which is especially interesting because she knew Bundy before his crimes.
Oh, wow.
Then there's Ted Bundy. Transcripts from interviews with Bundy himself. And of course, the popular Netflix docuseries, Conversations with Killer, the Ted Bundy tapes.
All of these works offer us this glimpse into the mind of a killer. But they raise important ethical questions too, like, are we exploiting these tragedies for entertainment? Are we giving these criminals the attention they crave?
Those are really important questions to consider. Where do you stand on the ethics of true crime?
Personally, I do think there's value in trying to understand the psychology of these people. If we can learn what motivates them, what warning signs to look for, maybe we can prevent future tragedies. But we have to approach these stories with sensitivity and respect for the victims. We should never forget the human cost of these crimes.
Yeah, I agree. So having explored all of this, what are the key takeaways from this deep dive into Ted Bundy?
Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways is that evil can wear a mask of normalcy. Bundy shattered the myth that monsters lurk in the shadows. He was charming, intelligent, he seemed so ordinary, and yet he was capable of such cruelty.
It emphasizes the need to be aware of our surroundings, trust our instincts, and be cautious, especially when we're vulnerable.
Yeah, it's a reminder that even the most unassuming person can be dangerous. We need to be vigilant, look out for one another, especially those who might be vulnerable to predators.
You know, Bundy's case also changed how law enforcement investigates serial killers. It showed the need for better communication between agencies, understanding the psychology of these criminals, and using forensic science to solve these crimes.
You're right. Bundy's crimes were a watershed moment for criminal justice. They forced law enforcement to develop new strategies for tracking and catching these guys.
So Bundy's case is a chilling reminder of the dark side of human nature. But it also pushed us to improve how we investigate and prevent these horrific crimes.
It's a legacy that continues to impact us today.
It's a lot to think about. This monster who committed these horrific acts. But then there's this other side of him, charming, intelligent, used it to lure his victims. It's just so disturbing.
It really is. That's what makes Bundy so fascinating and so unsettling. It challenges our ideas about good and evil. It forces us to confront this darkness.
Yeah. You know, after diving into all of this, I keep coming back to that same question. Does understanding someone like Bundy really help prevent these tragedies? Or is evil just too complex, too unpredictable?
That's the question, isn't it? It's a question that's plagued people for centuries. And I don't think there's a simple answer. But I do think that studying these cases, like Bundy, can be valuable. By trying to understand the motivations, the warning signs, the things that cause these horrific acts, maybe we can develop better ways to prevent them and to intervene.
So even though we may never fully get it, we can still learn from these cases and use that knowledge to protect ourselves and others.
Exactly. Knowledge is power. The more we know about the dark side of human nature, the better equipped we are to combat it.
Well, this deep dive has been Fascinating and unsettling. It's given me a lot to think about.
Me too. It reminds us that the world can be a dangerous place, but it's also a testament.
If you're interested in learning more about Ted Bundy, we recommend checking out the resources we mentioned. The Stranger Beside Me by Anne Rule, Ted Bundy, Conversations with a Killer, and the Netflix series, Conversations with a Killer, the Ted Bundy tapes. They offer more insight into the case, Bundy's psyche, and the impact of his crimes. It's a story that continues to fascinate and horrify, and it's a story that we can all learn from.
I agree, they're excellent resources.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into the world of Ted Bundy. It's been a journey, but an important reminder about awareness, vigilance, and understanding. Thank you for joining us.